So I'm Hollis Ashman. I'm the Enterprise Director at the University of Melbourne, and Caroline is a PhD student at the University of Melbourne, and she does an incredible amount of research on anti-counterfeiting. And we're going to talk a lot about how do we build and gain consumer trust. One of the key things that we've really begun to understand, we do a lot of packaging research, we do a lot of anti-counting research at the University of Melbourne, is that meat products are at a high risk for counterfeiting. This becomes a really significant issue, and when we look at Australian consumers, they're less concerned about food fraud. They're starting to be now. But when we look at Chinese consumers, they are very, very nervous about food fraud. And what we find when we start to look at the data, when we look at food safety, for example, when we talk about that language here in Australia, it means, do I have a HACCP process? Do I have my processes in control? When we look at food safety in China, when we look at the major incidences of people going to the hospital or dying, it's due to counterfeit foods. And so this is where the language kind of changes when you look at different countries. And so consumers' trust really becomes challenged because they start to scrutinize products when they start looking from a Chinese perspective as to what's really truly safe, because they see within their food system that when they say safe food, it doesn't quite mean what we all think it means. So what it means is that brands, when you export into Asia, into China, need to compete with fraudsters. Those are folks who are looking at the value of your brand and beginning to figure out how do they copy exactly what you're doing. Because that's going to determine what our consumers' initial trust, which is very fragile and easily destroyed. That initial trust can be established if the product passes a consumer's critical investigation and judgment on trustworthy attributes. The problem is, what are those trustworthy attributes? What's actually important to consumers, and can we impact it? So we, from an industry perspective, look at security technologies as a natural indicator of trustworthiness. We know we can verify, using these trustworthy indicators, those technologies, how trustworthy the product is. But the question is, do consumers see the same thing we think we're saying to them? Do they see those security technologies as a true indicator of trust? So when they appraise those security technologies, what are the influencers that can either strengthen their trust or make them more skeptical? What are the influencers that bring and add a premium value, that's what we all want, or decrease their status to a more everyday type product? And so part of the research we've done, we've looked both from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective. Qualitative because we want to know why. Quantitative because we want to know what. To begin to understand what are those levers that cause consumers to accept or reject different security technologies on meat packages. When we've looked at security technologies, we've looked at a whole slew of them. We've looked at them in different contexts. We've looked at QR codes. We've looked at near-field communication, we've looked at augmented reality, we've looked at all kinds of different things. We've also looked at a slightly different perspective from a design perspective. What is it that can really begin to influence? How personal does the imagery on the package have to be? Do I need to know who the farmer is? Or, how much Chinese versus English text? How premium or everyday does the package have to look like? And then how does that technology fit within those design constraints? And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Caroline. She's going to talk about the data.
Thank you. Wonderful. So just to mention that counterfeiters work in parallel to your business. So when you go, let's say in China, but we aren't limiting our research just to China. There's a lot of information that we have collated at the University of Melbourne on different countries. But with a focus on China, you'll find that counterfeiters actually have the ability to mimic you. And so you might do your due diligence in all this great technology to protect your supply chain all the way to your consumers. But in another part of China, there's another company that looks just like you, doing exactly the same thing, offering a very inferior product, damaging your brand. And it can actually shut down businesses and get them to retract back home. We don't want that. So we are looking at technologies, but there are other things that are cost effective, like design, as Hollis mentioned, that can really impact your branding and packaging. So quickly, we're just looking at these findings, just top level. There's a lot more. But technology has to be fitted for your food category. And you can use transparent purpose for that. And what that means is we assessed a number of images, like for instance, augmented reality, and some rated very low on trust with the Chinese consumers, some rated very high. The first one is rated very low. It says the consumers were, why would you use augmented reality on meat packaging? The other one was very high, cool, augmented reality, showing how I can use this technology to cook the meat. I would use this one. It was just communicating how to cook it on a barbecue or at home. Now, I understand that it's the same technology and it's actually the same group of participants that responded this way. What this shows is the technology can be trusted or not trusted based on the content and the information that you've provided with it. What we're finding as well is bundling technology or strategies for anti-counterfeiting. So this is showing Australia on the left and Chinese on the right. And we assess different security technologies. And at the top is, the top line on the left there is Australian-made logo. So Australians rate that very important. If we see that, we trust it. So if we go into our store and we see Australian-made logo on packaging, we believe it's from Australia. In China though, all the technologies were equally rated, and they're looking more for a bundled package. They're not just happy to rely on Australian-made logo. So they need many different types of options. I am not suggesting you need 5 different amazing technologies. It could be one good technology applied with many different other design strategies, which we can talk to you at the University of Melbourne. Also, identity links. What that is, for instance, we've assessed meat packaging here on the left and right. The one on the left was rated very low on trust, and the one on the right very high. The one on the left used the 2 same logos, Australian made and grading logo, same on the right. The difference was that the consumers couldn't look into the packaging on the left. They couldn't judge the meat quality against the actual photograph. They felt that the business was hiding something. So on the right, they could touch and feel, even though it was a printed out image, they felt that they could touch and feel and compare the product to the actual photograph. So linking not only the badges of the logo of origin and the grading, but all of these attributes together are really essential to build trustworthy packaging. We also compared categories. So from baby formula, olive oil, all the way through to meat, you can see that it's been rated over how many elements consumers were expecting to see, security elements, I mean. So in baby formula, they wanted it all. They want to protect their children, as we all do, and especially in an environment where counterfeiting is rife, they're really looking to protect the things that are going into their mouths. But meat, on the other hand, would you be surprised, is at the bottom. This does not mean it's less important. They also want to protect it. But they were saying that between 4 and 5 technologies or security attributes they want to see. So even though you might be working in meat or baby formula, or obviously all in meat here, but these is important to compare categories to see where meat falls with other categories. Design is powerful, and we think any kind of fitting technologies is like a QR code or an NFC chip, and we've assessed those too. But it's amazing how even a QR code or whatever technology you're applying, you can lose trust quickly with the consumer if you have not design embedded it. What I mean by that is at the top there, we've got an image of someone putting a QR code, but they've just put it on as a sticker. And the other one was with packaging. The QR code's embedded into the label. It was printed out onto a poster, which is next to the packaging where you can buy the product. Immediately, consumers thought the first image was very low, it was not trusted. It looked stuck on like a sticker and not professional enough. And the last one was packaging looks clean. This one is better. It is on pack with a poster showing what it does. So trust can be influenced. And these are the things that we want to point out. I'm going to miss this one, but it's about age and income, and that also is influenced as well. But we're just going to jump because I'm running out of time. I just want to show that everyday and premium packaging, for instance, a white styrofoam tray to a reusable wooden chopping board, Chinese consumers expect the same amount of security elements on both levels. So whether you're exporting large quantities of meat cuts that you think are still for the everyday consumer, but like for the masses, or for the premium deli markets, either way they want all the amount of security they can get on both of those levels. Ultimately, I just want to summarise that's just the things I've been talking about. But at the University of Melbourne, we offer anti-counterfeiting workshops and more information and insights that we have collated over time. We're really happy to work with industries, the meat industry especially, because we believe that supporting you to get to export as well and into other countries is going to build Australia. So please come and see us sometime.